It was just another quiet morning when the mail arrived. The crisp, white envelope nestled among the usual bills and junk mail looked completely ordinary. But as Sarah lifted it from the stack, a cold shiver ran down her spine. The return address was unmistakable: the Homeowners Association. Her fingers trembled slightly as she ripped open the envelope. At first, her eyes scanned the familiar, formal language. "This is to inform you that your property is in violation of the HOA guidelines." The words danced on the page, blurring together as she processed them. A chill gripped her chest. Messy garage. She could feel her pulse quicken. Was this a joke? Sarah had always kept the outside of her house in good shape, mowed the lawn, trimmed the hedges, even put out seasonal decorations. It wasn't perfect, but nothing in her garage warranted a complaint, not even clothes. Yet, there it was, a complaint. A demand for action. The HOA had sent an official letter, stating that her garage violated neighborhood standards. She knew who had done it. Karen, the woman who lived 2 houses down, always lurking around, her sharp eyes inspecting everything that didn't meet her idea of orderly. She was the neighborhood's self-appointed ruler, the one who wrote the rules in her mind and expected everyone else to follow them. Sarah frowned. There were no specific details about the garage, just a vague mention of unsightly clutter. The more she thought about it, the angrier she became. Sure, the garage could use a little tidying up, but who didn't have some boxes in storage or old furniture stacked in the back? No one else would complain about that, Sarah thought, almost certain. But Karen always found something to criticize. She was the type who would step out of her house at the first sign of an untrimmed lawn or a driveway that wasn't pristine. To her, everyone else was a rule breaker. And now, it seemed, Sarah had become the latest target in her mission to clean up the neighborhood. With a frustrated sigh, Sarah glanced out the kitchen window. And there she was, Karen, standing on the sidewalk, eyes fixed directly on Sarah's house. Her expression was unreadable, but there was no mistaking the smug satisfaction on her face. She was watching, waiting for Sarah to make the first move. Something about the way Karen stood there, hands on her hips, gave Sarah the impression that she wasn't just waiting for the garage to be cleaned. She was expecting it to happen. A subtle, almost imperceptible sense of control radiated from Karen as she locked eyes with Sarah from across the street. The hairs on the back of Sarah's neck stood up. This wasn't just about a messy garage. Karen had made her move. The HOA was her weapon, and she was using it to make Sarah bend to her will. But why now? Why target Sarah? It wasn't like her garage was the worst in the neighborhood. There were at least 3 other houses with far worse conditions, ones where the owners hadn't bothered to do any maintenance in years. So, why Sarah's garage? Why today? Suddenly, the answer hit her like a thunderclap. Was it a setup? Sarah's heart raced. The more she thought about it, the more it all seemed orchestrated. Karen knew exactly what she was doing. She'd seen the garage. Sarah had left the door open once a week ago while organizing, and Karen had probably taken note. Now, it looked like Karen was trying to make her the scapegoat. Maybe she thought that if Sarah was the one who was forced to clean up the mess, she'd be too distracted to notice something else. But Sarah wasn't going to fall for it, not without figuring out what Karen was hiding. She marched to the garage door, her mind racing. This isn't just about a messy garage. It never was. And deep down, she felt a sinking sensation. What if this wasn't just some petty HOA complaint? What if Karen was hiding something far darker behind her perfect neighborhood facade? The sun had barely set when Sarah made her way to the garage, her thoughts clouded with the strange turn of events. The letter from the HOA felt like a slap in the face, but there was something deeper gnawing at her, something that didn't sit right. She had to clear her head, so she decided to start by tidying up the garage, even though it was the last thing she wanted to do. But as she swung the door open, the familiar smell of dust and old cardboard filled her nose, and a chill settled over her. The garage wasn't particularly messy, just a few boxes stacked haphazardly along the walls, old furniture covered in sheets, and the remnants of a few weekend projects that had yet to be completed. It wasn't perfect, but it wasn't a disaster. Still, something felt off tonight. A quiet unease lingered in the air, as if the walls themselves were hiding something. Her eyes lingered on the boxes near the back of the garage. They were the ones she hadn't bothered to go through in months. Old holiday decorations, childhood keepsakes, a couple of boxes of random tools and odds and ends. She'd never felt the need to go through them. Everything seemed like junk. But tonight, her curiosity got the better of her. Sarah grabbed the nearest box, carefully pulling it down from the shelf. As she untaped the flaps, the weight of the box surprised her. It wasn't filled with old ornaments or scrap metal, but something much more valuable. She hesitated for a moment before reaching inside, pulling out a brand new power drill, gleaming, almost pristine, and still in its factory packaging. Her heart skipped a beat. Where did this come from? Her pulse quickened. The power drill was the first of many items she would uncover. One by one, she began pulling out high-end tools, expensive electronics, and gadgets she'd never seen before. A brand new tablet, still in its box, a set of pristine golf clubs, each one more expensive than anything Sarah could afford. A high-end camera. She couldn't even remember the last time she'd seen anything so new, so untouchable. She turned the items over in her hands, but none of them had any obvious labels or markings that would indicate where they came from. They were all in perfect condition, as though they had been bought just yesterday. A sudden thought struck her, so sharp it was almost painful. Were these stolen? The idea seemed preposterous. But why else would she have so many expensive items in her garage, hidden away like forgotten treasures? And why had she never noticed them before? The more Sarah sifted through the boxes, the more she realized that these items weren't just randomly placed. They were neatly organized, as though someone had gone to great lengths to hide them in plain sight. But it didn't make sense. If she had never seen any of this stuff, how could it be in her garage? Suddenly, she froze. A chill ran down her spine, the hair on the back of her neck standing on end. She'd seen a serial number on one of the boxes, a string of digits that she recognized. She'd seen it on the news. A local break-in had been reported just last week, where a neighbor's house had been ransacked and thousands of dollars worth of equipment had been stolen. Her stomach turned. These items had to be from that robbery. But the question was, how did they end up here? As Sarah slowly put the items back, she realized something else. Her garage door had been opened several times recently. She'd let the breeze in during those hot afternoons, and Karen, with her eagle eyes, could have easily caught sight of the items. Had Karen known all along? The thought of Karen coming over here, poking around, made Sarah's blood run cold. But it was the only explanation that made sense. Karen had always been a control freak, always prying, always inspecting. What if this wasn't a simple complaint about a messy garage? What if it was a setup? What if, somehow, Karen was involved in a much darker scheme? Before Sarah could process the thoughts swirling in her mind, a knock echoed from the driveway. She turned sharply, her heart pounding. She hadn't heard anyone approach. She crept toward the door, trying to steady her breath. Her pulse raced as she peeked through the window. A police car was parked outside. What was going on? Sarah's heart pounded as she stared through the window, the silhouette of the police officer standing by his patrol car, scanning the street. For a moment, the world seemed to slow. What were they here for? Was this all somehow connected to the stolen items in her garage? The thought sent a surge of panic through her chest. She stepped away from the window, trying to compose herself. Maybe they're just investigating the break-in, she thought, though her instincts screamed that something much darker was afoot. After all, Karen had been too quiet lately. The last few days, Sarah hadn't seen her anywhere. No fussy walks around the neighborhood, no clipboard clutched in her hand as she scrutinized her neighbors' lawns. Not even a glimpse of that judgmental, all-knowing gaze that usually hovered like a cloud over the entire block. Had she seen something? Sarah paced nervously in her living room, her mind racing. She knew that Karen, with her obsession for order and control, had been keeping a watchful eye on everything in the neighborhood. There was no denying it. Karen had a special way of making people feel like they were being judged every minute of the day. But now it felt like she was hiding something. The officer knocked again, this time more insistently, pulling Sarah from her thoughts. She knew she couldn't put this off any longer. Steeling herself, she walked to the door and opened it. "Good evening, ma'am," the officer said, his tone professional but firm. "Are you the homeowner here?" Sarah nodded, still trying to piece everything together. "Yes. What's this about?" "I'm afraid I'm in the middle of something." The officer stepped forward slightly, his gaze sharp. "We're investigating a string of break-ins in the neighborhood, ma'am. I was hoping you could help us with a few questions." Sarah's stomach twisted. She nodded slowly, not sure what to expect next. "Have you noticed anything unusual in your area recently?" The officer asked, his eyes scanning the surroundings as if he was trying to read between the lines. His gaze lingered on her garage door, but Sarah couldn't decipher the look in his eyes. Was he suspicious of her? She swallowed hard. No, nothing that stands out." The officer raised an eyebrow. "Are you sure? There's been a significant amount of stolen property recently, and we're looking into where it's going. There's a chance some of the items could have ended up in your garage." The words hit her like a freight train. She forced herself to stay calm. I'm sorry. I don't understand. My garage isn't." "Ma'am, we've received several reports," the officer interrupted, his voice stern now. "We need to take a look at your garage." Sarah's stomach turned. She was sure she hadn't said anything to anyone, but here the officer was, connecting the dots in ways that made her blood run cold. Could the items in her garage really be tied to the recent burglaries? Her mind raced, her pulse spiking again. And then, just as she opened her mouth to say something, a voice called from the street. "Everything okay over there?" It was Karen. She stood across the yard, staring at them with that familiar, all-knowing smirk. Sarah's breath caught in her throat. The woman had been gone for days, vanished from her usual haunts. But now, she was standing there, watching, as if she'd been waiting for something to happen. Her eyes never left Sarah's face. "Karen, what are you doing here?" Sarah asked, her voice sharp, though she wasn't sure why. "Oh, nothing," Karen said sweetly, her tone almost too calm. "I was just out for my daily walk, just making sure everything's in order. Wouldn't want the neighborhood to go downhill, would we?" The officer turned, giving Karen a polite nod. "Ma'am, I'll need to speak with you shortly." But Karen didn't seem to notice the tension in the air. "Of course, officer," she said, her smile never wavering. "I was just about to head back inside. Just wanted to make sure Sarah was aware of the condition of things around here." Sarah's heart skipped a beat. Condition of things. What was Karen implying? Sarah had a sinking feeling that the situation was spiraling out of control, and somehow, Karen was at the center of it all. The officer gave a curt nod and stepped toward the garage. "Ma'am, I'm going to need your permission to check inside." Sarah had no choice but to step aside. As the officer moved past her and into the garage, Sarah's mind was racing. Had Karen planted the stolen items there, or had she known all along? She couldn't shake the feeling that something was seriously off about Karen's sudden reappearance, and the eerie calm in her voice. Was she trying to throw suspicion off herself, or was she hiding something much darker? The air in the garage felt thicker than usual as Sarah stood at the door, her mind racing. The police officer had already begun combing through the items in the garage, his flashlight cutting through the shadows with an eerie precision. Every movement seemed deliberate, methodical, as if he were uncovering something much bigger than just a collection of misplaced objects. Sarah's pulse hammered in her ears as she watched the officer examine each item with careful scrutiny. The gleaming power drill, the tablet, the golf clubs. It was all too much, too perfect. How could she have never noticed the sheer amount of expensive, brand-new equipment packed into her garage? Her gaze flicked nervously to Karen, who stood by the fence, her eyes fixed on the scene unfolding before her. That smirk was still there, but now it felt like a mask. Karen wasn't just an observer. She was part of this strange, unfolding drama. "Ma'am, do you mind telling me where these items came from?" The officer's voice broke through the tension, pulling Sarah's attention back to him. He was holding up the tablet now, his expression unreadable. "Do you recognize any of them?" Sarah's throat went dry. I don't know," she stammered, her mind scrambling for an explanation. "They must have been left here by mistake. I didn't even know they were in the garage." The officer didn't seem convinced. He set the tablet down carefully and moved to the next box. His eyes darted to the tags and serial numbers on the items, nothing that would link them directly to anyone, but Sarah could see his suspicion growing with every passing second. A cold bead of sweat trickled down her spine. This wasn't just a casual inquiry anymore. This was an investigation, and she was the center of it. But the longer she stood there, the more she realized that this wasn't about the garage. It was about something bigger, something far darker. The officer's hand hesitated over another box. His fingers brushed over it, like he was expecting something more than just random junk. Sarah's breath caught. It was as though he was looking for something. Her eyes widened as he pulled out a small, nondescript object wrapped in cloth. A ring, an expensive one. Its intricate design glimmered faintly in the dim light, and Sarah felt her stomach lurch. "No, that's not mine," Sarah murmured, her voice barely a whisper. She reached out instinctively but stopped herself short, afraid that even the slightest movement might tip the officer off that she knew more than she was letting on. The officer held the ring up, inspecting it closely. "This doesn't appear to be something you just find in your garage by mistake," he said, his tone firm but not unfriendly. "This looks like something valuable. Stolen, maybe. And it looks like you didn't just stumble upon it. These items were hidden here for a reason." Sarah felt a knot form in her stomach, and her eyes involuntarily flicked back to Karen. The woman stood at the edge of the driveway, still watching with that unnervingly calm expression. For a brief, terrifying moment, Sarah thought she saw a flicker of something almost triumphant, in Karen's eyes. Karen hadn't just vanished for a few days, Sarah realized. She'd been watching, waiting for the right moment. She had orchestrated this entire thing, from the complaint to the investigation. Just as Sarah opened her mouth to protest, to explain that she had no idea how any of this had gotten there, Karen's voice cut through the thick silence. Well, looks like someone has a bit of explaining to do." The smirk on Karen's face widened, her eyes gleaming with an unsettling confidence. Sarah's stomach churned. Karen had set her up, planted those items in her garage. She was the puppet master, pulling the strings while Sarah remained in the dark. The officer turned sharply, his expression unreadable. "Excuse me, ma'am, but I'll need to speak with you now." Sarah's mind was spinning. Had Karen been using her garage all along as a storage unit for stolen goods? Was this the real reason she targeted Sarah with the HOA complaint? It was beginning to look less like an accident and more like a carefully planned scheme. The officer moved toward Karen, his tone now terse. "Do you know anything about this?" he asked, motioning toward the items. Karen smiled sweetly, but the smile didn't reach her eyes. "Me? Oh, I wouldn't know anything about that. I was just making sure our neighborhood is well kept. You know, just keeping an eye on things." Sarah's hands clenched into fists at her sides. Keeping an eye on things. Karen was a snake, slithering her way into the hearts of everyone around her, pretending to be the upstanding neighbor, while all along, she was a thief, a mastermind. The officer's eyes narrowed, and for the first time, Sarah saw something flicker in his gaze. Was it suspicion? Or had Karen already pulled some strings to cover her tracks? Without waiting for an answer, the officer turned back to Sarah. "We'll need to look into this further," he said, his tone heavy with implication. But for now, you're not under suspicion, ma'am. Just a precaution." But as Sarah watched Karen retreat back into her house, a cold feeling settled in her chest. The game was just beginning, and she was only a pawn in a much bigger scheme. The officer's footsteps faded as he walked back to his patrol car, his expression still unreadable. Sarah stood frozen in her driveway, the keychain in her mind, its faint logo branded into her memory. She hadn't been able to make sense of it fully, but something told her she was closer to uncovering the truth than she'd ever been before. The unease had shifted into something darker, a feeling that she was no longer just a bystander in this drama, but a part of something far bigger. As the officer pulled away, Sarah turned to face Karen, who was still standing across the yard, watching her with that unsettling smile. It was too much, too calculated. There was no way Karen had just happened to have an innocent role in all of this. No, Karen was the key, and Sarah was determined to figure out just how deep her involvement went. "Karen, what's going on?" Sarah's voice was low but forceful. Her frustration, her anger, everything had built up into a single, sharp question. "I know you know more than you're letting on. Why did you bring up the keychain? Why are you so eager to throw suspicion around?" Karen's smile faltered for just a moment before she regained her composure. She stepped closer, her heels clicking against the pavement with every step. "Sarah," she said softly, almost soothingly, "you're getting a little ahead of yourself. What happened here today isn't something that concerns you. But the truth, it'll come out eventually. Everything does." Sarah's heart skipped a beat. The way Karen spoke, the cryptic words, something about it chilled her to the bone. It wasn't just a threat. It was an implication, a hint that she wasn't the first person Karen had manipulated in this neighborhood, and certainly wouldn't be the last. "I don't buy it, Karen," Sarah replied, her eyes narrowing. "That keychain, where did it come from? And why did you know about it?" "That logo is from the community security group you've been so involved with. You have access to files, to information, don't you? So why act so innocent now?" For a moment, Karen's eyes flickered. It was a fraction of a second, but Sarah saw it. It wasn't fear. No, Karen didn't feel fear. It was the briefest look of something far more dangerous, a momentary loss of control. Sarah's pulse quickened. She's hiding something. She's not as untouchable as she thinks. Karen took a slow, deliberate breath, smoothing out her clothes as if Sarah had just insulted her. "You're very astute, Sarah," she said, her voice steady again, but with a hint of something darker in her tone. "But don't think for a second that you've uncovered anything. The keychain, the garage, none of it matters." She leaned in slightly, her voice lowering. "But if you really want to know the truth, maybe you should start looking elsewhere. There are bigger forces at play here than just you or me. You're not the first to stumble upon something you shouldn't have. And you won't be the last." A cold shiver ran down Sarah's spine. The words were more than just a threat. They were a warning. A warning about something far beyond petty HOA complaints and stolen goods. She wasn't just caught in Karen's game anymore. She was in something much darker. Sarah's mind raced, trying to piece it all together. Bigger forces. What did Karen mean? Was this about more than just the stolen goods? Was Karen part of something criminal? She couldn't ignore the suspicion rising inside her. She had to know more, had to get answers. Without thinking, she turned and walked back into the house, grabbing her phone. She scrolled through the neighborhood chat app, where neighbors usually discussed events and concerns. Her fingers flew over the screen as she searched for anything related to recent incidents. She found a thread titled "Suspicious Activity, Thefts in the Area," and clicked on it. The thread had dozens of posts, but one comment caught her attention. It was from a neighbor who had recently reported something odd. "I saw Karen talking to a delivery guy late last night. He was unloading boxes from a van that had no company logo. Never seen him before, but it's weird because Karen doesn't get that many packages." A chill ran through Sarah. She scrolled down further, her stomach twisting. The post had been marked with a date, just 2 days before the police had started their investigation. The pieces were starting to fall into place. Karen wasn't just hiding stolen goods. She was the one orchestrating the thefts. The realization hit Sarah like a ton of bricks. Her thoughts raced. What was Karen up to? How deep did this go? And why was she still pretending to be the innocent, overly vigilant neighbor? As Sarah stood there, staring at the screen, she felt a presence behind her. Her breath caught in her throat. She turned around to find Karen standing in the doorway, her eyes cold and calculating. "Looking for something, Sarah?" Karen asked, her voice smooth as silk. "I think you're asking the wrong questions." Sarah's heart raced in her chest as Karen stood silently in the doorway, her cold gaze never leaving Sarah. For a moment, the room felt like it was closing in around her. The air was thick with unspoken words, the tension almost unbearable. Sarah's pulse thudded in her ears, and her fingers tightened around the phone in her hand. Karen's words had the chilling edge of someone who knew exactly how much power they held. Asking the wrong questions. It wasn't just a comment, it was a command. A warning. Sarah's stomach twisted. She wasn't just a victim here. She was tangled in a web that Karen had spent years weaving, and now she was too far in to escape without consequences. "Why don't you come outside, Sarah?" Karen said suddenly, her voice soft but insistent. The invitation wasn't a choice, it was an order. "Let's talk about this." The hair on the back of Sarah's neck stood up. It was one thing to confront Karen face to face, but something about this felt off. Every instinct screamed at her to leave, to call for help, but she couldn't back down now, not when she was so close to uncovering everything. She had to know what Karen was hiding, and why she was so determined to keep it all buried. Sarah took a steadying breath and walked toward the door. As she stepped outside, Karen led her to the side of the house, out of sight from the street. The silence between them was thick, oppressive, and Sarah couldn't shake the feeling that every step she took was one closer to a trap. "Look, Sarah," Karen began, her tone uncharacteristically calm. "I don't want to make this harder than it needs to be. I'm just looking out for my neighborhood. I've always been a good neighbor, haven't I? And you, well, you've always been a little too curious for your own good." Sarah fought to keep her voice steady. "What do you want, Karen? Why did you bring those stolen items to my garage? You've been spying on me, on all of us. Why?" Karen's lips curved into a thin smile, but it was a smile without warmth. "You don't understand yet, do you? This isn't about just you or me. It's about control, Sarah. About keeping everything in its place." Her eyes gleamed with an unsettling mixture of self-satisfaction and something darker. "I've been patient. I've waited a long time for the right moment to move all the pieces into place. And now the game's finally starting." The words made Sarah's stomach lurch. The game. Was Karen referring to more than just her petty HOA complaints and the stolen goods? Was this about something even bigger? "What do you mean?" Sarah's voice was barely a whisper, but her tone demanded an answer. Karen stepped closer, her presence almost suffocating. "You're not the first to get curious, Sarah, and you won't be the last. But let's just say, I've learned to handle people like you." She reached into her pocket and pulled out a small keychain, one exactly like the one Sarah had seen earlier, the one with the logo that was connected to the neighborhood security group. Sarah's breath hitched as Karen dangled it in front of her. "This," Karen said, her voice low and dangerous, "wasn't just a petty complaint. It's how I've been keeping an eye on everything, how I've made sure nothing gets past me." Sarah's mind raced as the pieces started to come together. The security group, the stolen goods, the silent, ever-present surveillance. Karen had been manipulating the neighborhood, using her position to track people, to collect information, and to quietly build a network of control. It was never about the HOA. It was about something darker, something far more dangerous. "What do you want from me?" Sarah demanded, her fear quickly morphing into anger. "Are you trying to intimidate me? I won't back down. I'll expose you for what you are." Karen's smile faltered, but only for a split second. She was a master at controlling the narrative, at making herself look like the victim. "It's too late for that, Sarah," she said, her voice cold as ice. "You've already crossed the line. There's no going back now. But don't worry. I'll make sure you won't get hurt." Her eyes flashed with a dangerous gleam. "I'll let you walk away from this. For now." Sarah's heart thundered in her chest. The words hung in the air like a threat she couldn't ignore. As Karen turned and walked back toward the house, Sarah's mind reeled. This was no longer just about the stolen items. This was about a network of manipulation, control, and surveillance that extended far beyond what she could see. She was trapped, and no matter how she tried to escape, Karen's grip on the neighborhood and on her was tightening with every passing moment. Sarah watched Karen disappear inside her home, her mind churning with questions. How many other people had Karen manipulated? Who else was involved in this dark game? The answers were just out of reach, but Sarah knew one thing for certain. She couldn't walk away from this. Not now. Not when everything was starting to unravel. The night had fallen thick and heavy over the neighborhood, but Sarah couldn't shake the feeling that the darkness was hiding far more than just the usual shadows. She had stayed up all night, replaying Karen's words over and over in her mind. The cryptic threats, the unsettling calm in Karen's eyes. Every word Karen spoke had a double meaning, a warning, a signal that Sarah had stepped too far into a territory she didn't fully understand. The security footage, that was Sarah's next move. After Karen had slipped inside her house, Sarah had run back into her own home, grabbed her laptop, and immediately logged into the community security group's portal. She had never really paid attention to it before. Why would she? It seemed like just another part of the HOA's redundant bureaucracy. But now, it was a lifeline. Karen's connection to the neighborhood surveillance network was undeniable. If Sarah could find something, anything, to expose her, she would finally be able to break the grip Karen had over the entire block. Fingers trembling, Sarah clicked through the security footage archives. Most of it was mundane. Boring clips of empty streets, kids playing, neighbors walking their dogs. But there, in one of the corner frames, she saw a figure, dressed in a dark hoodie, sneaking up to a house she didn't recognize. It's her, Sarah thought, feeling the hairs on the back of her neck rise. The hoodie, the movements, it was unmistakable. Karen had been sneaking around, watching the neighbors through the security system she controlled. It was worse than Sarah had imagined. Karen had been tracking everyone. She clicked on the next footage, and then the next, and what she saw made her stomach drop. It wasn't just a few stolen items here and there. The footage revealed ransacked homes, items being taken under the cover of darkness. Large packages, jewelry, electronics, everything disappearing into the night like a well-orchestrated operation. It wasn't just theft, it was methodical. Someone had been controlling this for months, picking the right homes at the right times, and slipping in and out without leaving a trace. Suddenly, Sarah's phone buzzed, jerking her out of the trance-like state she'd fallen into. Her heart leaped in her chest when she saw who it was. Detective Lawson, the same officer who had come to investigate the garage. He was calling her, and from the tone of the text, she knew it wasn't going to be good news. "Sarah, I need to speak with you, urgently." She quickly replied, "What's going on? Did you find something?" The phone buzzed again almost immediately. "It's about Karen. Meet me at the station. This is bigger than we thought." A flood of adrenaline surged through Sarah as she slammed the laptop shut and grabbed her jacket. The detective's cryptic message only deepened her growing dread. What had they found? What else had Karen hidden? She didn't waste any time. Her mind was racing with 1,000 questions, each one darker than the last. What had Karen been doing all this time? What was her endgame? The closer Sarah got to the station, the more she realized just how deep this ran. If Karen had been running a criminal operation from behind the scenes, then she was far more dangerous than Sarah had ever given her credit for. Sarah stepped out of her car and walked into the station, the silence of the building somehow adding to the weight of the situation. She was led down a narrow hallway by Detective Lawson, who met her at a plain door. He motioned for her to follow him inside. The dimly lit room smelled faintly of stale coffee, and the air felt colder than it should have. Lawson didn't waste time. "We've been looking into Karen for a while now, Sarah," he said, his voice low. "We thought it was just a few isolated thefts. But this is organized crime. She's part of a network, and we've been tracking it for months." Sarah's heart dropped into her stomach. "What do you mean, network?" "Karen is. She's just a neighbor, a busybody." The detective shook his head. "That's exactly what she wanted you to think. She's been using her position in the HOA and the security system to cover for her operations. What you saw in the footage, that's just the tip of the iceberg. We've linked her to a number of stolen goods being trafficked to high-end buyers across the city." Sarah blinked, trying to process the magnitude of what she was hearing. "How did she pull this off?" Lawson sighed, rubbing his eyes. "She's been in control of the neighborhood security systems for years. Every time someone installed a new camera or alarm, she had a hand in it. No one ever suspected a thing because she made sure to keep it all under wraps. But we've been piecing it together. We've got her pegged as the ringleader." The pieces clicked together in Sarah's mind like a chilling puzzle. Karen wasn't just a neighbor. She was the mastermind, the one pulling all the strings. Every stolen item, every piece of evidence, it was all connected to her. "Then we have to stop her," Sarah said, her voice tight with resolve. "She can't get away with this." Lawson's face was grim. "We're already moving on it, but we need more. We need a confession, Sarah. We need you to help us get it." Sarah nodded slowly, feeling the weight of the task ahead. She wasn't just part of this story anymore. She was the key. And if she didn't act fast, Karen would slip through their fingers, and the whole neighborhood would remain under her control. Sarah stood at the edge of the station, her mind spinning with the details the detective had revealed. The weight of what was about to happen pressed down on her like a heavy stone. Karen was dangerous, and the network she had built wasn't just about stolen goods. It was about control, manipulation, and power. Everything Sarah had known about her neighbor had been a lie, a carefully constructed facade. "Are you ready?" Detective Lawson's voice broke through her thoughts. He stood beside her, his face set with determination, but she could see the uncertainty in his eyes. They both knew how risky this was. "I have to be," Sarah said, her voice tight with both fear and resolve. She didn't know what they were walking into, but she couldn't walk away now. Not when so many lives had been affected by Karen's web of deceit. "Good. Stay close to me," Lawson instructed. "We'll move quickly. We've got a warrant, but Karen's slippery. She might try to run." The plan was simple. Get in, confront Karen, and get her to confess. But Sarah knew from experience that nothing with Karen was ever simple. She could already picture the smug look on Karen's face, the way she would try to twist everything into a game of cat and mouse. She had always been one step ahead, manipulating people like puppets. As they drove toward Karen's house, the streets seemed eerily quiet, the neighborhood almost holding its breath. Sarah's thoughts raced. What if Karen had another escape route? What if she had already planned for this moment, anticipating every move? Karen was always prepared. Always. They arrived at Karen's house under the cover of night. The suburban streets were silent, the air still, but the tension felt suffocating. Lawson gave Sarah a quick, reassuring glance before he stepped toward the front door, knocking sharply. There was no answer. He knocked again, louder this time. "Karen," Lawson called, his voice stern. "We have a warrant for your arrest. Open the door." The silence stretched on, each second dragging out like an eternity. Sarah's pulse quickened. Something wasn't right. Karen was always so punctual, so meticulous. But tonight, tonight felt different. Suddenly, they heard movement inside. The door creaked open, just a crack. Sarah's heart skipped a beat. There she was, Karen, standing in the doorway, her face expressionless. Her eyes, however, betrayed a flicker of something else, a mix of surprise and something darker. She hadn't expected them to come tonight. "You don't have to do this, Sarah," Karen said, her voice calm but carrying an edge that sent a chill through Sarah's spine. "You don't know what you're getting yourself into. It's not too late to back down." Sarah's jaw clenched. "You've been controlling all of us, manipulating everyone around you. You used the HOA to create your own empire of fear. I know everything, Karen. It's over." Karen's lips twisted into a smile, but it wasn't one of triumph. It was the smile of someone who had already planned her escape. "You really think you can stop me? You're just a pawn in my game, Sarah. Always have been." Before Sarah could respond, Karen slammed the door shut, the sound echoing in the quiet street. Sarah's heart raced. It was happening. Karen was about to run. "Get back!" Lawson barked, but it was too late. The sound of heavy footsteps inside the house told them Karen was already making her escape. Without thinking, Sarah turned and sprinted toward the side gate, her feet pounding against the ground. She had to stop her. She had to make sure Karen didn't disappear into the night, like she had done so many times before. She reached the back of the house just as Karen emerged from the garage, a large duffel bag slung over her shoulder. She froze when she saw Sarah standing there, eyes wide with shock and fury. "You think you can stop me?" Karen sneered, her voice dripping with disdain. "You're just a fool if you think you can take down a whole operation." Before Sarah could react, Karen turned and bolted for the fence, her movements fast, desperate. But Sarah wasn't going to let her get away. She lunged, grabbing onto Karen's jacket just as she reached the top of the fence. The force of the tug sent them both crashing to the ground, the duffel bag spilling open, revealing stacks of cash, precious metals, and jewelry, evidence of everything Karen had stolen over the months. Lawson rounded the corner just in time to see Sarah wrestle with Karen on the ground. He pulled her off, his hand firm on her arm. "Let me handle this," he said, but Sarah wasn't letting go. "Not yet," she said through gritted teeth. "She needs to face what she's done. She can't get away." Karen's eyes flared with rage, but there was nowhere to go now. The network was crumbling, and Sarah had brought the final piece to the puzzle. She had caught the puppet master in her own web, and this time, there was no escaping. As the sirens of the approaching police vehicles grew louder, Sarah watched as Karen was handcuffed, her face twisted in disbelief. The terror, the control she had once held over the neighborhood, had slipped away. It was over. And as Sarah stood there, watching Karen being led away in cuffs, she finally felt a weight lift from her shoulders. She had exposed the truth, had taken down the mastermind behind the web of lies. The neighborhood would be free at last.